1:30 in the morning, the 29th of May, 1453. The first wave comes out of the dark. They are Bashi Bazouks, irregular troops, poorly armed, expendable by design. Sultan Mehmed II has sent them against the Theodosian walls, not to break through, but to exhaust the men standing on them. Behind the irregulars wait the disciplined Anatolian regulars. Behind the Anatolians wait for the Janissaries. 80,000 Ottoman soldiers against fewer than 8,000 defenders, 4,973 Greeks, according to the count taken by the emperor's own secretary George Safrances, plus roughly 3,000 Genoese, Venetian and Catalan volunteers manning 19 kilometres of walls around a city whose population has collapsed to fewer than 50,000 people. The walls hold through the first wave. The Bashi Bazouks fall back with severe losses. The Anatolians advance and are repulsed. Then the Janissaries come forward, and two things happen almost simultaneously. The Genoese commander, Giovanni Giustiniani, the one professional soldier whose presence has held the defence together for 53 days, takes a crossbow bolt or handgun shot through his breastplate. He is carried from the walls through a gate in the inner fortification, and the sight of his litter moving to the rear breaks the cohesion of his troops. At almost the same moment, Ottoman soldiers discover that a small postern gate called the Kerkoporta has been left open or inadequately secured after a sortie. Janissaries pour through. Emperor Constantine XI, Palaiologos, is 49 years old. He was born on the 8th of February 1404, the fourth son of Emperor Manuel II, and he has ruled a state that consists of Constantinople itself, the Prince's Islands, and a few scattered possessions in the northern Aegean. He has already buried two wives, Maddalena Tocco, who died in 1429, and Caterina Gattiluzio, who died in 1442. He has no children and no heir. The night before, he attended a final liturgy at the Hagia Sophia, Orthodox and Catholic worshipping together for the last time, received Holy Communion, returned to the Blackenay Palace, asked forgiveness of his household, and rode out the walls. When Mehmed had demanded his surrender days earlier, Constantine's answer was recorded by multiple chroniclers. "To surrender the city is beyond my authority or anyone else's who lives in it, for all of us have decided to die of our own free will, and we shall not spare our lives. Now the walls are breached." According to the accounts that survive, Constantine tears off his imperial insignia so that he will not be identified and captured. He draws his sword. He charges into the Ottoman line at the gate of St. Romanus with the last of his guard. He is not seen alive again. His body is never conclusively recovered. Mehmed reportedly has a severed head displayed and identified by those who knew the emperor's face, but the body itself vanishes among the mass of the fallen. Within a generation, the legend of the Marble Emperor takes hold among the Greeks of the conquered city. An angel rescued Constantine in his final moment and turned him to stone beneath the Golden Gate, where he sleeps until God calls him to reclaim what was lost. Mehmed enters Constantinople that afternoon on a white horse. He rides directly to the Hagia Sophia. When he finds a soldier hacking at the marble floor for loot, he strikes the man and declares that the soldiers may have the captives and the booty, but the buildings of the city belong to him. He surveys the ruined great palace of the emperors, abandoned, roofless, stripped of everything that once made it the administrative centre of the Eastern Mediterranean, and recites a Persian couplet. The spider weaves the curtains in the palace of the Caesars. The owl calls the watches in the towers of Afrasiab. He sprinkles earth on his turban in an act of humility before God and orders an imam to recite the Muslim profession of faith inside the Hagia Sophia. The building that served as the supreme cathedral of Orthodox Christianity for 916 years became a mosque before sunset. 3 days of permitted looting follow. Approximately 4,000 are killed. Between 30,000 and 50,000 are enslaved. Mehmed ends the sack early to preserve his new capital and installs the anti-unionist monk Gennadius Scholarius as ecumenical patriarch, reviving the institution under Ottoman authority, where it continues to this day. Constantine XI had no children, but he had brothers, and those brothers had children, and the fates that awaited them would scatter the last imperial bloodline of Rome across 3 continents and 5 centuries. Demetrius, the elder surviving brother, surrendered to the Sultan and died a monk in Adrianople. Thomas, the younger, fled to Rome carrying the skull of St. Andrew and lived on a papal pension of 300 ducats a month. Thomas's eldest son Andreas styled himself Emperor of Constantinople, sold the title twice, once to the King of France, once to the King of Spain, and died so poor that his widow had to beg the Pope for 104 ducats to pay for the funeral. Thomas's younger son Manuel returned to Constantinople and accepted a salary from the man who had destroyed his uncle's empire. Thomas's daughter Sophia married the Grand Prince of Moscow and brought the double-headed eagle to the Kremlin, where it remains on the Russian state seal today. 6 generations after Thomas, a man named Theodore Palaiologos was buried in a parish church in Cornwall with the imperial arms engraved above his name. Theodore's grandson died at sea off the coast of Spain, and his only surviving child, a girl named Godskall, was baptised at St. Dunstan's in Stepney on the 24th of January 1694. After that baptism record, there is nothing. The bloodline that connected the last emperors of Rome to a church in East London simply stops. If you're enjoying this, subscribing is the best way to support the channel. It's free and it helps us keep going. The Palaiologos dynasty ruled the Byzantine Empire for 192 years, from Michael VIII's reconquest of Constantinople on the 25th of July, 1261 to the fall on the 29th of May, 1453. They were the longest reigning dynasty in Byzantine history. The empire they governed, which its inhabitants never called Byzantine but always Roman, had existed in some form since the consecration of Constantinople as the eastern capital in 330 AD, a span of 1,123 years. If measured from Augustus, as the Byzantines themselves would have insisted, the state they inherited was nearly 1,500 years old. What the Palaiologoi ruled at their peak was already a diminished thing. Michael VIII had recovered Constantinople from the Latin Crusaders, who had held it since the catastrophe of 1204. But the restored empire controlled only portions of Thrace, Macedonia, parts of the Peloponnese, some Aegean islands, and a rapidly shrinking corridor of northwestern Anatolia. The trajectory from 1261 onward was one of relentless contraction. The Ottomans took Nicaea in 1331. Nicomedia fell 1337. By 1380, the empire consisted of Constantinople and a handful of isolated exclaves. By 1450, Constantine XI governed the capital city, the Prince's Islands, and the despotate of the Morea in the Peloponnese, an enclave inside the Ottoman state, paying tribute to the Sultan for permission to exist. Yet this era of political collapse produced what scholars call the Palaiologan Renaissance. The Church of the Holy Saviour in Kora, Carrier Kami, was rebuilt and decorated between 1310 and 1321 under the patronage of Theodore Metochites. Its mosaics and frescoes are considered among the supreme achievements of Byzantine art. Mystrus in the Peloponnese became a centre of philosophy where Gemistos Platon revived Platonic thought and directly influenced the Italian humanists who would launch the Renaissance. Manuel Cresoloras taught Greek in Florence. John Argyropoulos carried manuscripts to Padua and Rome. The migration of Byzantine scholars westward, accelerated catastrophically after 1453, was a major catalyst for the rebirth of European civilization. The dynasty that presided over the final dissolution of the Roman state also seeded the intellectual revolution that followed it. The siege had lasted 53 days. It began on the 6th of April 1453 when Ottoman cannon opened fire on the Theodosian walls. Mehmed II was 21 years old. The Hungarian engineer Orban had cast the colossal Basilica bombard for the Sultan, reportedly 8 meters long, capable of hurling stone balls weighing 500 kilograms over a kilometre and a half, though it could fire only 7 times in a day. When the Great Chain across the Golden Horn blocked his fleet, Mehmed ordered approximately 70 ships dragged overland on greased logs across the hills behind Galata and into the harbour, outflanking the sea defences entirely. A partial lunar eclipse on the 22nd of May, and unexplained lights around the dome of the Hagia Sophia on the 26th, devastated Byzantine morale. Old prophecies held that Constantinople would fall when the moon showed a dark face. The moon showed a dark face. The final assault came in 3 waves. The expendable irregulars first, to tire the defenders, then the Anatolian regulars who nearly broke through before being driven back. Then the Janissaries, the Sultan's elite slave soldiers, advanced to the sound of drums and fifes in disciplined ranks. The breach at the Kirkoporta, Giustiniani carried off the walls. By midday on the 29th of May 1453, the city that had been the capital of the Roman Empire for 1,123 years belonged to the Ottoman Sultan. Of all the empires that fell, Rome, Persia, the Ottomans themselves, which do you think produced the strangest afterlife for its ruling family? I'd like to know. Comments below. The Hagia Sophia was converted to a mosque before sunset on the day it fell. The Blashene Palace, the last imperial residence, was left to deteriorate. Its ruins still stand in the Fatih district of modern Istanbul, largely unexcavated. The great palace complex, which had once covered 100,000 square metres between the hippodrome and the sea walls, was already derelict. Mehmed's couplet about the spider and the owl was not a metaphor but a description. The imperial treasury, the sacred relics, the libraries that had preserved classical texts for a millennium, dispersed, destroyed, or absorbed into Ottoman collections. The holy relics alone represented centuries of accumulation. Fragments of the true cross, the lance that pierced Christ's side, the robe of the Virgin. Some were carried west by fleeing clergy. Most were never accounted for again. 19 kilometres of Theodosian walls, which had repelled every attacker for 1,000 years, were breached and would not be substantially repaired for 5 centuries. The population that was not killed was enslaved, ransomed, or scattered across the Ottoman domains and the slave markets of Edirne and Bursa. The city that had been the wealthiest in the medieval world, the crossroads of Europe and Asia, the seat of the Orthodox Church, transferred in the space of a single morning from the last emperor of Rome to a 21-year-old Ottoman sultan. Constantine XI's 2 surviving brothers were not in the city when it fell. They were in the Peloponnese, governing the despotate of the Morea as co-rulers and quarrelling with each other. Neither had sent meaningful reinforcements to Constantinople. The consequences of the fall reached them 7 years later. Demetrius Palaiologos, the elder brother born around 1407, had always favoured accommodation with the Ottomans. After 1453, Mehmed allowed both brothers to continue as vassal despots, demanding 10,000 ducats annually in tribute. They failed to pay for 3 consecutive years, each year compounding the Sultan's displeasure. When Mehmed invaded the Morea in May 1458 and again in 1460, Demetrius surrendered the fortress city of Mistras on the 29th of May 1460, 7 years to the day after Constantinople. The Sultan received him with honours and granted him lands at Ainos in Thrace, plus revenues from the islands of Imbros, Lemnos, Samothraki and Thassos. The arrangement lasted approximately 7 years. In 1467, Demetrius's brother-in-law was caught allowing subordinates to cheat Ottoman tax collectors. The family was stripped of everything and relocated to Didymoteicho in poverty. Demetrius's daughter Helena had been kept by the Sultan on a separate estate in Edirne with a pension. She was forbidden to marry. She never entered Mehmed's harem. She died around 1469. Demetrius and his wife retired to a monastery in Adrianople. He took the monastic name David. He died in 1470, aged approximately 63, leaving no descendants. The elder brother of the last emperor of Rome ended his life in a monk's cell, dependent on the charity of the man who had destroyed his family's empire. Thomas Palaiologos, the younger brother, born 1409, took the opposite path. When the Ottomans invaded Morea, Thomas fled, first to Venetian-held Methone, then to Corfu, then to Rome. He arrived in November 1460 and was received by Pope Pius II, who recognized him as the legitimate emperor of Constantinople. The Pope assigned him a pension of 300 ducats per month, with an additional 200 from the cardinals, 6,000 ducats annually. Thomas's household complained this was barely sufficient. Thomas's most consequential act was the delivery of the skull of St. Andrew the Apostle to the papacy. On the 12th of April 1462, in an elaborate ceremony at the Milvian Bridge outside Rome, Thomas presented the relic to Pius II. Cardinal Bessarion delivered the oration. The skull was enshrined in St. Peter's Basilica, where it remained for 502 years until Pope Paul VI returned it to Patras, Greece, in September 1964 as an ecumenical gesture. Thomas died on the 12th of May 1465, aged approximately 56. He was buried in St. Peter's. His exact grave has never been located. It was lost when the old basilica was demolished and replaced by the current structure in the 16th century. Andreas Palaiologos, Thomas's eldest son, was born on the 17th of January 1453, 4 months and 12 days before Constantinople fell. After Thomas's death, Andreas and his siblings were placed under the guardianship of Cardinal Bessarion in Rome. From 1483, Andreas styled himself Imperator Constantinopolitanus and bore the double-headed eagle on his seal, titles his father had never claimed. His adult life was a prolonged exercise in selling what he did not possess. In 1494, he ceded his rights to the Byzantine crown to Charles VIII of France in exchange for a promised annual pension of 4,500 ducats and a personal guard of 100 horsemen. Charles died in 1498 without fulfilling the terms. Andreas reclaimed the titles. In his will, drawn up shortly before his death, he granted them to Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile. They never used them. Andreas died in poverty in Rome in June 1502, aged 49. His widow Caterina petitioned Pope Alexander VI for 104 ducats to cover the cost of the funeral. He was buried in St. Peter's near his father. Whether he left children is uncertain. A Constantine Palaiologos, serving in the papal guard, who died in 1508, may have been his son, but the connection is unconfirmed. The titular heir to the Roman Empire in the East died a beggar, and the Pope's office paid for the coffin. Manuel Palaiologos, Thomas's younger son, born on the 2nd of January 1455, chose the path no one expected. After failing to find employment with the Duke of Milan or Charles the Bold of Burgundy, and after discovering that his papal pension had been halved in his absence, he travelled to Constantinople in 1476 and presented himself to Sultan Mehmed II, the conqueror of his uncle's empire. Mehmed received him generously. Manuel was granted an estate, a military salary of 100 aspers per day, and concubines. He remained Christian throughout his life and received the Ottoman honorific El Ghazi. He may have served in the Ottoman navy. He died sometime before 1513 during the reign of Bayezid II. His elder son John died young as a Christian. His younger son Andreas converted to Islam and served as a court official. The younger Andreas is last attested during the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, who ruled from 1520 to 1566. After that, silence. The verifiable direct male line of the imperial Palaiologos ends not with a battle or an execution, but with a converted Ottoman courtier whose name disappears from the administrative records sometime in the mid-16th century. Not all Palaiologos who remained under Ottoman rule lived quietly. Messi Pasha and Hasmurad Pasha were reportedly sons of a brother of Constantine XI, captured as boys during or shortly after the fall, and raised as Muslim pages through the Dev-Shirmeh system. Hasmurad became Beylerbey of Rumelia, governor of the Ottoman Balkans, and died in battle in 1473. Messi rose to become admiral of the Ottoman navy and Grand Vizier in 1501. Venetian archives reveal that Messi once offered to surrender Gallipoli to Venice for 40,000 gold ducats and rule over the Morea as a client state, suggesting that even after decades of Islamic conversion and Ottoman service, something of the old Palaiologos ambitions survived. He died on November 15th. 101. The boys who had been taken from a burning Christian empire became some of the most powerful men in the Islamic state that replaced it. Sophia Palaiologina is the member of the family whose consequences outlasted all the others. Born Zoe, probably around 1449, Thomas's daughter was raised in Rome under Cardinal Bessarion's care alongside her brothers. In 1469, Pope Paul II proposed her as a bride for Grand Prince Ivan III of Moscow, whose first wife had recently died. The Pope's motives were strategic, drawing Russia into an anti-Ottoman alliance and advancing the Catholic Orthodox reunion agreed at the Council of Florence. Ivan's motives were prestige. Marrying the niece of the last Byzantine emperor elevated Moscow's standing above every other Orthodox court in the world. A proxy marriage was performed at St. Peter's Basilica on the 1st of June, 1472. Sophia departed Rome on the 24th of June and travelled for nearly 5 months, through Italy, across Germany to Lübeck, by sea to Reval, then overland through Pskov and Novgorod to Moscow. Before she reached the capital, the papal legate accompanying her was informed that he would not be permitted to enter Moscow carrying the Latin cross before him. Sophia had returned to orthodoxy. The Vatican's entire plan for religious reunion collapsed before the bride reached her wedding. The formal Orthodox ceremony took place on the 12th of November, 1472, at the Dormition Cathedral in the Kremlin. Sophia's influence on Moscow was material and lasting. She imported Italian architects and artisans who rebuilt the Kremlin's wooden structures in stone, the walls and towers that define it today. She introduced Byzantine court ceremonies and protocol. She received foreign ambassadors in person, a practice unheard of among elite Russian women who were ordinarily confined to the terem. She reportedly encouraged Ivan to end the formal tributary relationship with the Mongol Golden Horde, which was completed in 1480 at the Great Stand on the Ugra River. She bore Ivan 11 children, among them Vasily III, whose son would become Ivan IV. Ivan the Terrible, the first Russian ruler crowned as Tsar. The double-headed eagle, the heraldic emblem of the Palaiologos dynasty, first appears as an official Russian state symbol on Ivan III's Great Seal of 1497, stamped on a charter granting lands to his sons. Ivan placed the Byzantine eagle alongside the existing Muscovite symbol of St. George, slaying the dragon. The eagle persisted through the entire imperial period, was abolished after the Revolution of 1917, and was restored on the 30th of November 1993 by President Yeltsin. It remains the coat of arms of the Russian Federation. The idea of Moscow as the Third Rome was articulated by the monk Philotheus of Pskov in letters written around 1510 to 1521. Two Romes have fallen, the third stands, and there will be no fourth. Scholars note that Philotheus intended this as an eschatological warning. Moscow must uphold orthodox purity or face divine punishment, rather than as a political program of expansion. But the concept outlived its author's intentions and became a cornerstone of Russian imperial self-understanding for centuries. A question that genealogy answers with precision: did Palaiologos blood flow into the Romanov dynasty? It did not. The line ran from Sophia to Vasily III, to Ivan IV to Fyodor I, who died childless in 1598. Both the Rurikid dynasty and the Palaiologos bloodline in Russia ended with him. The Romanovs were connected to the Rurikids through marriage, not descent. Anastasia Romanovna married Ivan IV, and her great-nephew Michael Romanov was elected Tsar in 1613. Michael carried no Palaiologos blood. Ivan the Terrible was the last Russian ruler with a biological connection to Byzantium. Sophia died on the 7th of April, 1503 in Moscow. Her remains were transferred to the Cathedral of the Archangel in 1929 when the Soviets demolished the Ascension Convent. A forensic facial reconstruction from her skull was completed in 1994. She was approximately 54 years old at death. The double-headed eagle she carried from Rome to Moscow in 1472 is still there, 550 years later, on the seal of a state she could not have imagined. Beyond the direct imperial line, the Palaiologos name persisted through two western branches, one in Italian aristocracy, one in an improbable chain linking Pesaro to Cornwall to the Caribbean. The Montferrat branch originated when Emperor Andronicus II married Yolande of Montferrat in 1284. When Yolande's brother John I died childless in 1305, the marquisate passed to Andronicus's fourth son, Theodore I Palaiologos, who arrived in Italy in 1306, converted to Catholicism, authored a military manual called Les Enseignements, and founded a cadet dynasty that ruled for 227 years. The line produced 11 marquises navigating the treacherous politics of northern Italy through alliances with Genoa, Savoy, Milan and France before ending with Giovanni Giorgio Palaiologo, formerly Bishop of Casale, who became the last marquis when his nephew Boniface IV died without an heir in 1530. Giovanni Giorgio married Julia of Aragon on the 21st of April 1533 in a desperate attempt to produce a successor. He died 9 days later, on the 30th of April. His one illegitimate son Flaminio was never legitimized. Emperor Charles V granted Montferrat to the Gonzaga Dukes of Mantua. Margaret Palaiologa, Giovanni Giorgio's niece, and the last familial link between the Gonzaga and the Palaiologos name, died on the 28th of December, 1566. The Cornwall chapter is the strangest of all. Theodore Palaiologos was born around 1560 in Pesaro, Italy. His family claimed descent from Thomas Palaiologos through a supposed son named John, a figure absent from contemporary Byzantine sources. The claim has divided scholars for centuries. Stephen Runciman dismissed it. Jonathan Harris called it almost certainly incorrect. Donald Nicole termed it unproven. John Julius Norwich and the biographer John Hall considered it plausible. The Vatican librarian Leo Alatius, writing in 1648, listed Thomas's sons as including a Iowan, providing some independent corroboration. The question has never been settled. Theodore's early life was violent. In 1578, he and two uncles, Scipione and Leonidas, were convicted for attempted murder in Pesaro. Leonidas was executed. Theodore, spared as a minor, was banished from the Duchy of Urbino. He arrived in England in 1597, likely via the Spanish Netherlands, and entered the service of the Earl of Lincoln. He married Mary Balls of Hadley, Suffolk. He eventually settled at Clifton Hall in Landulph, Cornwall, as a guest of the local squire. He died there on the 21st of January, 1636. The brass memorial plaque in St. Leonard's Church, Landulph, identifies him as descended from the imperial line of the last Christian emperors of Greece, tracing the genealogy through 6 generations from Thomas to himself. Above the inscription are the imperial arms of Byzantium, a double-headed eagle with the imperial crown. When the vault was accidentally opened in 1795, the body was found well preserved, described as much above the common height, with an oval countenance, an aquiline nose, and a very white beard reaching low on the breast. In 1828, a delegation from the provisional Greek government, searching for a Palaiologos to offer the newly independent Greek throne, had the grave opened again. They found a skeleton of prodigious size embedded in quicklime with its feet turned to the east in the Byzantine royal burial tradition. No living descendants could be found. The throne went to Otto of Bavaria instead. On the 18th of April 2007, 50 Greek Orthodox priests visited Landulph and conducted a memorial service with chants, incense, and the Byzantine eagle flag. Theodore's eldest son, also named Theodore, fought for Parliament in the English Civil War and was buried in Westminster Abbey in 1644, possibly the only person of Greek imperial descent ever interred there. Theodore's youngest son, Ferdinand, emigrated to Barbados, acquired a 197-acre estate, served as churchwarden and vestryman, and died on the 3rd of October, 1678. His tomb in St. John's Parish Church identifies him, like his father's, as descended from the imperial line of the last Christian emperors of Greece. Ferdinand's son, Theodore, married. Martha Bradbury became a privateer and died at sea near A Coruña, Spain in 1693. His only surviving child was a posthumous daughter named Godscall Palaiolog, baptised on the 24th of January 1694 at St. Dunstan's Church in Stepney. After that baptism record, the trail ends. No marriage, no death certificate, no children, no further mention in any archive that has ever been searched. The last traceable person who could claim descent from the emperors of Constantinople was an infant girl in East London at the end of the 17th century. What happened to her is not known. Approximately 1,800 people in Greece today bear the surname Palaiologos, with another 2,000 using the feminine form Palaiologo. None can be proven to descend from the imperial dynasty. During the Ottoman period, wealthy Greeks routinely adopted prestigious Byzantine surnames, making genealogical verification without documentation impossible. And the documentation does not exist. No DNA study targeting Palaiologos descendants has ever been published. Several families have pressed claims over the centuries. The Palaiologo Oriundi of Italy assert descent from the illegitimate Flaminio of Montferrat, but only added the name Palaiologo to their surname in 1930. The Palaiolog family of Romania, whose most famous member was the French diplomat Maurice Palaiolog, ambassador to Russia during the First World War and member of the Académie Française, claimed imperial descent through an unverifiable chain. As recently as 1862, a Theodore Palaiologo of West Norwood, London, pressed his claim to the Greek throne after King Otto's removal. He was ignored. The physical legacy is both monumental and contested. The Hagia Sophia, converted to a mosque on the day of the conquest, became a museum under Ataturk in 1934 and was redesignated a mosque by President Erdogan on the 10th of July 2020. The Chora Church, containing the supreme masterpieces of Palaiologan art, mosaics and frescoes commissioned by Theodore Metachites around 1310 to 1321, was similarly reconverted and reopened for Muslim worship on the 6th of May 2024, with its mosaics covered by curtains during prayers. Maestras, the Peloponnesian capital of the Palaiologos despots, has been a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1989. The Palace of the Despots is under restoration. The Metropolitan Church of Hagios Demetrios, where Constantine XI was crowned in January 1449, still has a marble double-headed eagle set into its floor. The monastery of Pantanassa, built in 1428 and still inhabited by Orthodox nuns, preserves burial places of imperial family members. In December 2024, a fresco portrait of Constantine XI was identified at the Holy Monastery of Pamagiston Taxiarchon in Aegaleia, Greece, described by the Greek Ministry of Culture as the only known depiction created during his lifetime. The double-headed eagle endures as the most visible inheritance of the Palaiologos dynasty. It serves today as the official emblem of the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople, the Church of Greece, the Church of Cyprus, and Mount Athos. Through Sophia's marriage, it serves as the state emblem of the Russian Federation. The Pisanello Portrait Medal of Emperor John VIII, struck in 1438 during John's visit to the Council of Ferrara, Florence, generally considered the first portrait medal of the Renaissance, survives in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Victoria and Albert Museum, the British Museum, the National Gallery of Art, and the Louvre. The dynasty's artistic and intellectual legacy is housed in collections from Washington to Istanbul. What the Palaiologoi lost in territory, they embedded in the cultural foundations of both Western Europe and Russia. Godskall Palaiolog was baptized in Stepney on the 24th of January 1694. She was the granddaughter of a Barbados planter, the great-granddaughter of a man buried in Cornwall beneath the double-headed eagle of Byzantium, and the last person whose lineage can be traced, however imperfectly, however contested, to the emperors who ruled Rome's eastern half for more than 1,000 years. After the baptism entry in the parish register, there is nothing. No marriage, no burial, no will, no child. The bloodline that ran from Michael VIII's reconquest of Constantinople in 1261 through Papal Rome and Muscovite Russia and the hills of Montferrat and the parish church at Landulph and a sugar plantation in Barbados and a privateer's death off the coast of Spain ends with an infant girl in Stepney, whose life after that January morning is a blank page. The 1800 Greeks who carry the name Palaiologos today almost certainly do not carry the blood. No DNA study will recover it. No claimant has proven it. What survives is something more durable than genealogy. The double-headed eagle flies over the Kremlin and the Ecumenical Patriarchate and the churches of Greece. The marble double-headed eagle is set into the floor at Mistras, where the last emperor was crowned. The legend of the marble emperor endures in Greek folklore. The last Constantine turned to stone, waiting beneath the golden gate for the call that will return him to his city. The dynasty ended. The idea did not.